What was the last console that you purchased? And were there games or a game that motivated you to make that purchase? Since the first inception and the idea of a home gaming system, the games themselves were an integral part of motivating the sale of a high-dollar home video game console. If you wanted to play Super Mario Bros., you had to get a Nintendo Entertainment System. If you wanted to play Sonic, you needed a Sega Genesis. And this all took on a reinvigorated shape with the dawn of Xbox and Halo. But there were also strong pushes from other games like Gears of War and even Call of Duty. And the PlayStation 1 had its own draw with titles like Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil and even Tekken. Regardless of when you jumped into console gaming, the history of platform choice is interwoven with exclusive titles that could only be played on a particular platform. For me personally, it was World at War with Call of Duty and Gears of War that brought me back into console gaming, and in recent years I was motivated to get all of the platforms because I wanted something like Breath of the Wild on Nintendo, but then I also wanted Ghost of Tsushima and God of War on PlayStation. Well, all of this is apparently changing for Xbox. While the idea of an Xbox exclusive has largely vanished from their own marketing and their own public dialogue, they have continued to signal that games should be playable everywhere. We haven't yet seen exactly how those plans will come to fruition, and it remains to be seen just how far back and just how many titles they decide to make the jump to rival platforms like we saw with games like Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves. Well, according to an Xbox insider and numerous subsequent articles, Microsoft has a plan, and the plan has a name: Project Latitude. It would seem that all of the public statements made by Microsoft CEO, they're directly connected to internal plans, and to some of us this isn't surprising at all. But the reports seem to indicate that no game is safe, and the larger franchises are the most likely targets. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to hear what you think. So, if you want more content like this, be sure to hit subscribe and that like button. Now, in this video, at first, I want to look at Project Latitude and what it is, along with the articles and the speculation about what titles are going to make the jump. Then I want to look at where we're headed, not just with Xbox, but with the gaming market in general. What will the draw be for Xbox? Will there even be sort of an Xbox platform to consider for the public, and is that something that even Microsoft is considering? Lastly, I'm going to tell you what I think about all of this, because we previously did a lot of Xbox coverage on this channel, and then I went out of town and a bunch of new information came out. I will also be doing a separate show and a discussion about the changes coming to Game Pass along with Call of Duty, so be sure to check that out. Now, much speculation has been floating around about what Xbox games may end up being ported to PlayStation and Nintendo. This all started in early 2024 when rumors surfaced about Starfield and Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush. There was even some of the rating websites that made it seem like other titles would be coming. Then, the great debate shifted from if this would happen to, well, it'll only be these 4 games. And on one side, we had what felt like a pretty fairly logical position. If they're willing to move these 4, they will be willing to move others if they're confident they can make money. The other side was more dismissive, claiming that these titles weren't very big and they were old or less relevant. Well, these sale charts of these games made it very difficult to maintain that position, especially once Satya Nadella drew attention to the sales success of Xbox games on PlayStation. And with the already announced Xbox Showcase, speculation started swirling that Microsoft could use that event to announce games headed to PlayStation and Nintendo, which, for many, that was similar to earlier this year. This is just something that they can't see happening. And while that discussion has been ongoing, a new report from Windows Central points out that there is an internal plan that leaves little room for doubt that more games are coming, and they're very likely to be big Xbox names. The article comes from Jez Corden, and the title is "Microsoft's Quest for Short-Term Money is Doing Long-Term Damage to Windows, Surface, Xbox, and Beyond." Now, in it, he discusses a wide range of topics, but what got everyone's attention and the gaming world buzzing was his comments about more games being developed for PlayStation. The following quote gives us both the project name as well as the reach of Microsoft's internal plan. The plan to move Xbox games to other platforms is codenamed Latitude internally, and I know there's a debate and unease at Microsoft about whether or not this is a good idea. More upcoming Microsoft-owned games slated for PlayStation are already being developed. At least for now, they're potentially obvious games you'd most likely expect. Now, those obvious games have many YouTubers and games journalists looking very squarely at Halo, Gears of War, and Starfield. What other titles would be obvious? Well, your guess is as good as mine if it's not those titles. So imagine a world where the most iconic flagship titles land on PlayStation. It almost feels like some weird gamer fan fiction, but the logic is hard to deny. Once you start moving games and you start making money, why wouldn't you capitalize on your larger and more well-known franchises? Especially when Satya Nadella made it clear that if he had his way, there would not be exclusives. Well, it seems that he is pushing for that, because the aggressive nature of this internal plan is another aspect of the article that got attention. Here's the quote. From what I've heard, Microsoft is pushing for no red line of what games could come to PlayStation, and it all revolves around Satya Nadella and CFO Amy Hood's mandate to increase every department's margins. It's hard to imagine a world where Xbox or Xbox leadership will be able to hold the line against what Microsoft is pushing for. Once the ink dried on the $70 billion check, Microsoft clearly started looking for ways to make the money back. And the recent studio closures are likely just the beginning. They are, according to this report, pushing for a complete shift to being a publisher, with what feels like a very lack of concern about the platform and the brand of Xbox, which is both understandable and justifiable to a point. The sales numbers of the Xbox Series consoles is likely playing a role from Microsoft's perspective. And like the title of Jez's article indicates, he doesn't agree with the strategy. He says the following. Like many of Microsoft's other recent strategies, pursuing this strategy is a short-term margin booster with long-term consequences. Yes, the industry is struggling, and Microsoft isn't the only hardware manufacturer that has seen declines, but destroying the foundational reason to buy an Xbox isn't the answer you give if you do care about the long term. Now, some might push back and say that this is the long-term strategy, and that the console push by way of exclusives is just not worth pursuing after failing and falling so far behind. There would also be the rebuttal that purchasing a publisher the size of Activision Blizzard was a clear sign that leveraging exclusives would take a back seat to leveraging the large amount of property now underneath the Microsoft umbrella. And the purchasing that they've been doing, that's a pattern that Jez Corden finds concerning. He said this. They acquire companies at a breakneck speed, underinvest in integrations, and then shut down those divisions and products while wondering what went wrong. We've seen it repeatedly. Reams of layoffs, underbaked integrations, low investment, and taking customers for granted. It's hard to disagree with what he's saying here. After you hear Phil Spencer admit that they didn't integrate well with Arcane Austin and then they just ended up closing them down. Or you see the talented team at Tango Gameworks shut down. That's the studio behind Xbox's most award-winning first-party game last year, Hi-Fi Rush. I'm not the only one who thinks that was short-sighted. The author of this article, Jez, he tweeted the following in the wake of the recent studio closures. He said, Tango being shut down feels like just incredibly bad. I can't get over it. It feels so short-sighted. So you can see why his article focused on the short-term gains that will lead to long-term consequences. Talent loss is not felt immediately. It's typically felt years later, which could be setting Xbox on a trajectory that many don't want to see happen. The first question many are asking, including myself as well as the article that started all of this, is, well, what will be the draw? As I stated at the beginning of this video, consoles and gaming platforms have their entire history rooted in one thing: exclusive games. Now, there are those who rail against this from an ideological position. They think exclusives are bad. But if you look at it from a purely business perspective, it's difficult to deny the simplicity and the efficiency of the value proposition of an exclusive game. Does anyone need an in-depth market explanation or business analysis to understand where they have to go to play Mario Kart or Spider-Man? Did the consumer need a vast and deep understanding of gaming budgets to figure out where they could play Mario or Sonic? The faulty comparison of shopping for a TV and then, well, you can watch every streaming service, it just doesn't work because the history of television programs and television shows, it's not directly connected to the hardware manufacturers that were also apparently making TV shows, because they weren't. There's a clear disconnect for the consumer. You buy the TV and the people making the programs provide those programs in a various amount of ways. Atari, Coleco, Nintendo, Sega, Xbox, and PlayStation laid the groundwork for home gaming systems, and they did this by leveraging their own games. To buck against this trend in consumer expectation, it's been in place for almost 50 years since the dawn of a home gaming entertainment system. But it may not be daring in Microsoft's mind. It might just be the natural evolution of a platform that failed to solidify itself as a market leader. Which leads to another question. Will Xbox even be considered a platform in the future? They're certainly committed to hardware, but there are hardware options right now that aren't considered platforms, like the Asus ROG Ally. All the rumors about future Xbox hardware points to something that's more like a PC console hybrid, or maybe some sort of handheld. Not a single internal leaked document, or not any of the Xbox insiders that are talking about this, have even hinted at a traditional console being Xbox's next hardware effort, which really makes you wonder. If Microsoft and Xbox don't consider themselves a platform with this Project Latitude plan, will the consumer think of them as a platform either? And broadening out from the consumer, will PlayStation and Nintendo feel like they have to follow suit? Many are anticipating that Sony will announce a stronger push into PC just this week with their Sony Group corporate strategy meeting. But even a stronger push to PC doesn't necessitate the erosion of exclusives or having the identity of a console or platform evaporate. And what about Nintendo? Given the success of the Nintendo Switch, I can't see them feeling any pressure to change course, especially when Xbox is doing this pivot from third place. They aren't exactly leading the market, they seem to be chasing it. So, what do I think about all of this? First, I have to point out my previous video where I argued that Microsoft had killed Xbox, and if you actually watch the video instead of just replying and reacting to the thumbnail or the title or just the idea, you would see that I argued that Xbox is disappearing as a brand and what is emerging is Microsoft Gaming. And this is a sentiment that has apparently been echoed internally by folks at Xbox, and it's been criticized by Xbox insiders and fans of Xbox. They are starting to see what the rest of us saw last year. And while it feels like a hostile takeover, it really isn't. It's just Dad grabbing the wheel of the car and saying that he'll be driving now. And Project Latitude won't be the only internal plan to make landfall. Game Pass is now rumored to be facing significant changes, from price increases to adjustments to the tiers to even the addition of a new tier. All of this on the heels of hearing that the next Call of Duty will be hitting Game Pass day one. So the Xbox fans and the Xbox loyal can't seem to catch a break here. Even the good news about Call of Duty coming to Game Pass, well, even that good news is laced with the ominous threat of change. And if Satya Nadella's plan is to work, quality will have to go up. You can't be a successful publisher if your games come out too early, if they score poorly, or if they fail to garner good sales or good player engagement. Developers will need to be equipped to succeed and retain talent. That's going to be tough to do under the weight of Microsoft's corporate policies and the looming threat of layoffs or studio closures. If Microsoft wants to shift away from exclusives entirely and abandon the idea of being a console platform, well then so be it. But in order for that to work, other changes will be necessary. Managing all these studios will be a Herculean effort, and to some degree it's uncharted territory. Their best route to success would be to give a lot of the larger and more long-standing studios more autonomy, giving them exceptions as well to the 18-month contractual policy so your contract workers can stay until the project is brought to market. Allow teams to operate with good levels of independence due to the seeming impossible task of managing so many different teams and different game projects. Microsoft knows software, and they have deep pockets, so they can certainly bring two things to the table that can help with game development. They can bring funding, and they can bring market reach. But when it comes to game quality and creativity, they should leave that to the developers and the talent. If Microsoft can get out of their own way, they may end up making a really great game publisher. But for now, the future is uncertain. But those are just my thoughts. Now it's time to hear your thoughts, and you can do that in a comment below, or you can join us for the live stream. There'll be a card here, and there's also a pinned comment. That's how we always end these videos. And if you like this content and you want more of it, be sure to hit the like button, hit share, and subscribe.